Yes, all right. So workflows, just to give you a very brief summary off the top, they're a way to define a sequence of steps, which can both be garden commands or custom scripts. And these essentially are our take on, for example, a CI pipeline, except one of the differentiators is that you can run your workflow from your local dev machine, possibly in the same cluster as in CI, so you can test things out as you go and have access to sort of all the power of integration tests and all of your full power setup before you commit. Go to the next slide. So just drilling down a little bit more, workflows are a new top-level config type, like modules and projects. So you define the steps of a workflow in the configuration, and each step is either a garden command, like deploy or test or run task, or a custom script, which is basically a shell script, which, as we'll see later, has access via template strings to outputs and other things from the previous step. So you can feed things from the steps from the step commands into the scripts. So let's just dive right in and see what this looks like. I'll just share my screen here. There we go. Can everybody see my screen? Yes. All right, so on the left here, you can see that I've written a couple of workflow configurations. You can also see here on the bottom left-hand corner that I'm making use of a new feature, which is that we now support custom config names. So you can have a prefix. So yeah, there's this file here, workflows.garden.yaml, which lives alongside the project level garden.yaml. Anyway, so this workflow here on the left, intake test, it runs the db init task, which you have to find here, which is basically a task that populates the database with test data. We print some stats in the db init step as a way to demonstrate that you can access the outputs of previous steps. Then we run the integration tests, and then we clean the database of all test data after we're done. So here on the right-hand side, you can see that the workflow is executing. This is done via the new run workflow command. So you just run the workflow by name. And as you see here, in step number 2, we're interpolating the module version and the duration of the task run in milliseconds, just as a trivial example. A more realistic example of using script steps would be, for example, to maybe download some files or prepare custom authentication, and maybe closer to the end of the pipeline, you might publish artifacts or do any more custom things like that. But by being able to pipe through results from commands and script steps into the other steps, you have quite a bit more power to play with. And another thing to note here is that all of these steps are using the same garden context, which means that this runs significantly faster than it would if this were just a bash script that ran garden run test db init, then a script, and then the integration test and so forth. And it's also important to note that if you have workflow set up in your project, you can run this thing from CI simply as set up some environment variables and just do garden run workflow my workflow, and there you go. So you can also this makes it much easier to test and debug CI pipelines locally, because you don't have to rely on the CI system for the whole thing. Going to the next slide. Let me see. Mike, could you share the slides again? There we go. Just to recap, some of the use cases for workflows, and as an extension of what you can already do with the base garden commands, is using a script step early in the pipeline to download files and maybe download some binaries, do some custom auth configuration, running tasks before or after tests, because currently you can't have tasks depend on tests, nothing can depend on tests. So this gives you a bit more flexibility like that. And then at the end, if you have some custom logic for publishing artifacts, whether it's a Docker image or test artifacts, you can just put that right in there. Yes, I think that about covers it.